So hello everyone. So I'm Kate, everyone. Those of you who saw my name and were expecting a different Kate Middleton, I have done that joke at quite a few fuels though. So I think most of you have probably heard it before, no longer funny. Anyway, I am assistant pastor here working with Matt, so you can come and commiserate about that with me later. No, he's not listening. Okay, good to know before we start. I'm a psychologist by background, although I started out life as a medic and then ended up working here, so go figure that. My parents are still trying to figure it out anyway. I have two kids. I have a little boy who's going to be 5 in a month, and I have a daughter who is 11 going on, what we think about 14, 15? Yeah, something around there. Anyway, so what I want to talk to you today is about how we ride the waves of the challenges and the ups and downs, the roller coaster of life right through that age group. And it's interesting to me when I speak to kids and youth workers these days, because I do feel like I have two example people in my house. Nathan, who at nearly 5 is still doing quite a lot of lying on the floor screaming. In fact, today did it just out there when I actually had somewhere quite, that I needed to be. But no, apparently it was important to lie on the floor and scream. So there's that. But also my daughter, who is just heading into that wonderful time of adolescence, which as a parent I might say is a great joy. I enjoyed it a lot more as a psychologist than I do as a parent. But that, for the record and the video, is the last thing I will say about my daughter, because she watches YouTube. I learned that last year. Okay, so we know that there are some challenges that face our children and young people as they grow up. And if we're thinking about how we want to support them, we know that we've got to get them through some of this. But we know also that there are things going on for kids and young people in their own brains, in their development, which can create some challenges for us. If you weren't here and you didn't hear me talk about that last year, then go home, check out on YouTube, and listen to the one that I did last year, because it will fill in some gaps for tonight. But I'm going to assume for the record that you've heard it. But in a nutshell, there are two main things going on, particularly in adolescence, but also at the beginning of childhood. There's this whole challenge of figuring out the really difficult question of who you are. As adults, we have a concept in our minds of who we are. We know roughly what we're good at, what we're bad at, what other people think of us, and we're pretty secure with that. Kids have no idea. At first, they don't even know they're separate from us. They move into adolescence and they're starting to piece together the fine-tunings of a sense of their identity, their self-esteem. The other thing that's going on, particularly in adolescence, but also at the beginning of that sort of toddlerhood, childhood phase, is the challenge of emotions that can suddenly feel quite powerful and out of control. So Nathan at 4, nearly 5, doesn't really know what hits him when those emotions come in. Neither do I, because sometimes they just get too much and he doesn't know how to handle it. And I'm not going to talk about Leah, but teenagers certainly also have times when they don't know what's just hit them, when the emotions feel too much, and sometimes it can look a lot the same from where I'm standing as a parent. The teenage tantrum versus the toddler tantrum, that frustration and that not knowing how to manage emotions. And you guys will probably work with kids and young people all along that age spectrum who might be dealing with one or other of those challenges. So there's a buzzword which you'll hear about again and again from psychologists and all teachers and all kinds of different sources, and that is, of course, resilience. And resilience is about the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties, challenges that life might throw. The ability to spring back, to bounce back, whatever life throws at you, to still be standing. So resilience is about understanding how our kids get through whatever life throws at them, but also just the normal everyday challenges of growing up, of changing, of developing, of suddenly becoming one of those weird grown-up people who you always found slightly annoying. This is not an easy task, and it's not something that happens overnight. So resilience is a really key thing that we need to think about as we are helping children and young people to get through that whole phase, whether they're in the primary school age, whether they're secondary school, or even the young adult stage of that, because some of the brain changes that go on don't finish until your early 20s. So resilience is about how do we adapt to storms, to rough times, to difficulties? How do we manage to thrive in spite of that stuff? And it's really key to what you guys are doing with the kids and young people you work with. Any of you who are parents like me, it's key to what we're doing as we're trying to raise children and young people. Because it isn't enough anymore for me just to tell them what to do all the time. Because some of the most difficult decisions they have to make will be made at a time when I'm not there. You guys might not even be there. So we have to raise kids and young people who are resilient, who can learn how to manage difficulty, how to make good decisions, how to pick themselves up if they've fallen down. So what I want to talk to you about tonight is about 5 things to do with resilience that we need to learn for our own resilience, but also we need to apply to the care and the support that we're giving to young people. So 5 things. So if you're keeping count, if you're falling asleep, if you're needing to get home and I'm still on number 1 in 20 minutes, then you can just slip out the back. That's going to be fine. Okay, I have no time on my clock, just time since I started. So it's like time doesn't exist for me. So good luck with that. Okay, number 1 though is this. Storms will always come. And it's easy for us to approach life. It's easy for us to want this to be true, that if we get everything right, if somehow we figure it out really well, we can get through life without any of the nasty stuff. We like to think it as parents, if I can somehow do this parenting job right, I can get my kids through life without them ever having to deal with any of the rubbish or nasty stuff that life can throw at them. But it's not true. I can't do that for my life. I can't protect my kids from that stuff. You can't protect the children and young people from the things that they will encounter, because that's the one thing that we know for sure, is that storms will always come. You'll be familiar with the story, the parable in Matthew's gospel and also told in other gospels, where of the guy who builds his house on the rock and the guy who builds his house on the sand. And you're familiar with the story, so it seems to me, I'm not a great architect. We did build a bit on our house before we moved to Hitchin, but I'm not a great expert. But it seems to me that there's obviously one guy who took a bit of a shortcut, because it's presumably quite easy to throw up a house on sand. You can dig a ditch, that's all quite easy, and he threw up his house. And then there's this other guy who put loads of work into it and built a much more secure house. But what's interesting about that story is that if you read it, there's the same verse, exactly the same words in both cases, and it's this one that's on the screen. So both of those people, whether they did it well, the building, whether they did it not so well, however wise they were, however they might have taken shortcuts, the same thing happened. The rain came down, the streams rose, and the winds blew and beat against that house. So resilience isn't about somehow teaching the kids and young people you support, or even for you, how to avoid life's dramas, how to avoid the storms, because that's not possible. A lot of storms come at us when we least expect it. You never planned to have that as part of your life story, but it hit you. So resilience isn't about never falling. It's about what you do when you've fallen over. I say this all the time to young people. Success isn't about never falling down. It's about what you do when you get back up. It's about still being standing. The difference between those 2 stories in Matthew's gospel is what happens after the storm. Is someone still standing? Have they managed to hold on to the essential things that really matter, or has it totally devastated them? I don't know if there's any gardeners in the house. It's that time of year where soon, you start to plant stuff. Soon I'll be planting my tomato plants, because yes, I am that old. It comes over you, gardening, when you least expect it. But when you plant tomato plants, for those of you who don't know, here's a little horticultural tip for you as a little bonus. You mustn't water them too much when they're young. Why? Because if you do that, the roots never grow deep enough. And then when they're bigger and they have to support a bigger plant, you won't be able to keep up with the watering and the plant will die. So you have to start from the very beginning, expecting the challenges that will come later on in that plant's life. And life is a bit like that. Our kids and our teenagers, we have to prepare them for what their future is likely to bring, for the challenges that may well come. We have to enable them to grow really good roots. We have to start with the storms in mind. And it isn't just what life throws at them, because life does throw difficult stuff at you. And in this room, we could talk about the things that life has thrown at us that we never thought it would. The redundancies, the bereavements, the illnesses, the I don't know, the miscarriages, the difficulties, the friends who stopped talking to us, the marriages that broke up. Life throws this stuff at you. But it isn't just the external stuff. Sometimes the biggest thing we need to be resilient about is another truth that we will all face, no matter who we are or how hard we try, and that's about failure. Because you will fail. It doesn't matter how good you are and how much you try to be perfect. Every single human being will fail. So resilience isn't about getting it right all the time. It's about what you do when you've screwed up, when you've failed, when you've hit a problem. This is Hannah McLeod, who's a member of the GB hockey team who won gold at Rio. Did anybody hear her at the Letchworth School at St Francis the other week? Okay, just me, fine. So she was speaking at an International Women's Day event. Amazing speaker, if you ever get the chance to hear her. If you have teenage kids, take them. My daughter was like this the whole way through. Oh, I'm not talking about her. Anyway, the daughter I'm not talking about. But she tells this amazing story of how the same team went to London, to the Olympics when they were in London, and they got a bronze there. And everybody was saying to them, you failed. How does it feel to fail, basically? And she's saying that you've got to see if you did your best, if you tried your hardest and you got the bronze, or maybe you didn't even get that, maybe you came 5th or 3rd or whatever it was. That is success. You have to appreciate that and not see it as a total failure. She says if you look at her teammates and the people who made it into the final team, who eventually then went on to win the gold, she says the only difference between us and the people who didn't make it is how we picked ourselves up after our mistakes. She's really explicit about saying we weren't that much better in terms of making fewer mistakes. No, it was about what we did when we'd made them. And we have to teach young people how to live with that approach, because understanding failure, dealing with it well, can be a key part of success. And in fact, it's a very key part of resilience. This is Tanya Byron, who also, funnily enough, spoke at that event, who is a great psychologist. And she says that the only way you become resilient is by falling over and picking yourself up. It's the only way to learn. And there's a really interesting question for our kids around whether we are trying to protect them too much these days. How do our kids learn how to fail? Where's the spaces where they have a go at something and really mess it up? That's actually not a bad thing. You think, oh my goodness, my kids had a go at something and it's kind of a total disaster. They turn out to be totally rubbish at it, and you think, what a bad choice that was as a parent. That may be the most brilliant thing you've done all week, because finding opportunities for your kids to learn about failure is so important. If we protect them too much, they never get a chance to learn how to be resilient, how to get up, how to have another go, how to grow, how to improve, how to get better. Because almost everything that's worth doing is hard when you start doing it. Number 2 in my 5 is about foundations, because the foundations we build on really, really matter. It doesn't matter how amazing your house is. If it's on a rocky, rough foundation, it'll fall down. That's the story, isn't it, in Matthew's Gospel? The guy who built his house on the sand, it didn't have enough strength to take it when things got difficult. But the one that was on the rock, it did not fall, because it had good foundations. But our culture tells kids all the time to build their lives on stuff that's really rubbish in terms of foundation. It tells them about things that are important, that they must focus their lives on. Things like being perfect, for example, which I've already talked about, doesn't really work. If you build your whole life on trying to be perfect and never failing, you will end up struggling with a lot of anxiety, because nobody is that perfect. It's just not possible. There are other things that life tells our kids they should build on. Girls, by the time they're 9, are used to being told that they have to be beautiful. Why is that? Why is it so important that my daughter is beautiful? My son is beautiful too, but no one tells him. Well, I do all the time, but mostly that's just to annoy my husband. But why? And actually being beautiful isn't something to build your life on. Things change, your looks change. It's not a totally solid foundation. Success isn't a solid thing to build on, because what if it goes wrong? What if you lose that job? What if you fail that exam? Money isn't a good thing to build it on, because that can go too. So what do we build our lives on? What's the foundation? You know, this is one thing where we as the church really can teach our kids an important truth about the things that really are solid, the things they can depend upon, the rocks. We talk about tripods as being one of the most solid foundations you can have. And here's 3 things that we can teach our kids. If they're asking the question of whether they're valuable, let's tell them that they are valuable. Why? Because they're made in the image of God. The Bible tells us that every single human being is a reflection of the God who created them. That's amazing. Every single person in this room is a flicker of a hint of who God is. That's amazing. On your most rubbish day, when you've messed up in the biggest possible way, when you feel about this big and you hope that nobody sees you for the rest of the day, remember that. You are amazing and you are valuable because you're a flicker, an image of the God who created you. That's awesome. Our kids need to know that. They ask, are they loved? Who loves me? How do I control whether I'm loved or not? Are they loved? They're children of God. Of course they're loved. They have a creator who adores them. The Bible tells us that God's Spirit touches us. We know who he is. We know who we are, father and children. Human love is so flaky, we get it wrong. Even as parents, when we're trying to do it right, we mess up all the time. But God, that's something they can depend upon, that they are loved and that they are valued by the God who created them. Are they significant? Our kids want to know if they're not the top, if they're not the best one, if they didn't get the award. Are they significant? Are they still valuable? Of course they are. They're unique. They're created utterly unique. There is nobody better at being the person that they are than them. And some of our teenagers spend a whole lot of time trying to be somebody else. Why? You want to be the person that you are. You are the only person. I'm going to quote Chesney Hawkes for those of you who are old enough. That there's, yeah, you see, some of you are. The rest of you, go and look it up on YouTube. It's a great song. Anyway, what's it? Nobody can be myself like I can for this job. I'm the best man. I love that song. Anyway, I think I was actually born the year that song came out, which those of you who know, I have a significant birthday coming up. Go and look it up. Anyway, number 3 is about your emotions. Here's a truth that we need to learn and we need to teach kids and young people. Your emotions are not truth. Now, I'm not saying they're not true, because that's messing with your mind a bit, but think about it. There's different types of information in the world, isn't it? So if I was to get a ruler and measure this table and say to you it is, 65 centimetres square, or whatever it is, you could get a tape measure, any of you could come up and measure it, and you could say, yes, that is true, because that piece of information is a fact. It's sort of solid and reliable. Now, if I said, who's on the front? Emily, this is where you don't want to say. If I said, well, Emily has a really beautiful jumper on today, you all might, yeah, that's true. But some of you are thinking, I think it's rubbish. What is with that colour? It is a very nice jumper, actually. Just never sit on the front row again. Why? Because that's not fact. What is that? It's an opinion, yeah. Now, opinions are influenced by so many things. They're influenced by my own perspective, my past experience, my understanding. The lighting in this room could totally transform the colour of your sweater. They're not truth. Now, what do you think your emotions are? It's an interesting question. So your emotions, this is a model of the way your emotions work. And they're designed to warn you when something significant might be going on in the world around you. You have a part of your brain whose job it is to spot potentially important stuff that's going on. And it triggers an emotion as part of that, the physical changes that go with it. So if you're feeling anxious, the sort of funny butterfly stomach thing, the fidgetiness, all of the sweating and your heart racing, but also the analytical side of that, as your brain's thinking, well, what is it that's going on? Do I need to do something? Do I need to make a decision or take some action? Is there something I need to do in this moment because this matters? So a lot of your emotions, the negative ones in particular, operate like one of these. They're like a smoke alarm. They alert you that something might be going on that might need your attention. But they don't tell you that it's definitely going on, do they? And the problem is that when they activate this thinking part of your brain, they don't just activate the nice rational thoughts that say helpful things that enable you to deal with the crisis and get on. Whatever your crisis is, maybe you're late for a meeting, maybe you're struggling with a piece of work, whatever it is. Typically, they light up lots of other stuff in your head, which may be influenced from stuff from your past or worries and insecurities you have, all of that stuff. So not only are you thinking, I'm going to be late, you're thinking, I'm rubbish, I'm such an idiot, I'm always late. They're gonna think I'm totally unreliable. Nobody is ever going to want me to do this job again. This is a total disaster, I've ruined everything. None of those thoughts are helpful in the moment that you're stuck in traffic. But your brain may well trigger them. And the thing is, they're not necessarily true. They are opinions triggered by the state, the circumstance, and the state of mind that they're in. They're things that your brain is warning you might happen. So if you feel stupid, you're not necessarily stupid. You can feel it, but you're not. If you feel like an idiot, you may not be an idiot. If you feel like the worst is going to happen, it's not necessarily. Your brain could be wrong. Sometimes when we're anxious, your brain is firing off telling you that the worst is definitely going to happen. It's not. Do you know statistically how few of the things that you worry about ever actually happen? Not many. So we have to recognize that like a smoke alarm, sometimes our brain fires off too much. When the last time your smoke alarm went off, how many people was your house actually burning down? No. Last time ours went off, somebody who I'm not talking about had tried to wedge a croissant in the toaster, which, by the way, does not work. So we have to be aware it's not necessarily truth. These are emotions. And our job then is to challenge them, to analyze, to decide what we want to act on them. Number 4 is that our instincts are not always helpful. This is an image from the films of the J.K. Rowling books of the Dementors. Those of you who've read the books or seen the films will know. But this is a monster that she depicts, and it's interesting that it's based on her own experiences of anxiety and depression. And there's a scene in one of the films where Harry, the key character, is talking about what he's most scared of in Oh, well, people on the video, you just have to lip read. Okay, the third way that your instincts can be unhelpful, person on the front row here, blow that up for me and stand up so people can see you, is to do with how we respond to our emotions. So this is your rough day that you're having. Emotions are building up. They're building up. Okay, you can pause for a minute. But because this is just what happens on a rough day, isn't it? Now something else has happened. You blow a bit more. Yeah, but... Okay, just pause. Now, what's going to happen if we don't let the air out of that balloon? Yeah, either it will pop or you can hold it up nice and high and then let it go. They will all come out and it won't be pretty. But our instinct often with emotions is to hold on to them, to suppress them, not to deal with them, not to let them out. And that's not generally a helpful instinct. So we have to teach children and young people, and we have to learn ourselves positive ways to process our emotions, because holding on to them isn't always the best thing to do, especially the painful ones. This is Shakespeare saying that to weep is to make less the depth of grief. There are some emotions where it is so important that they're processed, that we let them out, that we find a space to do that. After quoting Shakespeare, another wise old man, Gandalf, also says, "I will not say do not weep, for not all tears are an evil." Our whole attitude to emotions cannot be, well, I'm going to push them down and suppress them. It has to be about finding helpful ways to express them. This is a quote from a guy called Roger Baker, who's an expert in this field of psychology, and he says this: "Facing feelings ultimately reduces the disturbing power of the emotions, opening the door to healing. Shutting the psychological gates can cut off the flow of feeling and hinder any effective understanding and resolution." So we have to give our young people tools, strategies, good approaches to help them deal with the difficult emotions that they do experience as they grow up. We have to teach even the littlest ones to learn to name and understand what their emotions are. What is that horrible feeling? And then as they grow, we have to help them learn helpful things to do. And the times when it goes horribly wrong and they do all over the place, or they pop or whatever. We have to help them understand what happened. How next time will they deal with that a bit differently? Number 5 is about motivation. And this is perhaps the most significant thing that the biggest positive gift that we can give our children, our young people. Because understanding what your why is the most important thing in resilience. The key thing is, what are you focused on? What's going to get you through this rough patch? What's the purpose of your life? What's your understanding about what you're trying to achieve? What's your understanding about the person that you are? This is a great quote talking about vision. It's saying the vision must be followed by the venture. It's not enough to stare up the steps. We must step up the stairs. So there's 2 challenges there that we have to help our children and our young people. And the first one is about vision. It's about dreaming. Do you know how many young people in particular I speak to have not learned how to dream? Or maybe life's knocks have just made them give up. They'll spend a lot of time telling me all the things they can't do. We have to teach them how to dream, how to have vision, how to have ambitions and things that they want to do and they want to achieve. And we have to help them believe that they can do it, because that's what will get them through. That's what will create their resilience. But then we have to help them to start to make sensible steps, because it's no good spending your whole life saying, oh yeah, I'm going to do this, and then never actually even starting the most simple thing, saying I'm going to be a brain surgeon, but you've never actually got around the small challenge of passing your maths GCSE. We have to help them to start to look at how they get through the little practical steps. And sometimes we have to help them adjust and rebuild their vision and dreams when maybe there has been something that hasn't been achievable, or maybe life has chucked something at them and thrown them off course. Ultimately, what can we bring children and young people that they can't find in the world out there? Apart from that foundation, we can bring them a hope. We can bring them a vision. We can bring them a purpose in a world that can sometimes feel to children and young people these days very dark, very hopeless, very full of despair and of negativity and discouragement. We can bring the opposite of that. We can shine light into that stuff, and we can help them to dare to dream. And that will get them through the rough stages, because that's the key part of life. So I want to end by praying, if that's okay, because I know this is the end of your evening, and I know you guys are all doing amazing, fabulous work, both with the children and young people you work with, several of you also raising your own kids, and all the other work that you do as well. And I want to pray. This is from Philippians 2:15, and it's from the Message. So let's just grab a moment to pray. Father God, I want to thank you for every person in this room, and thank you for this evening and all the things that they've learned. Lord God, help us to pull together all the things that you've spoken over us this evening, all the truths and the ideas and the things that you want us to catch. But most of all, Father God, we pray for that last question, the what's the why, and I pray for these people that you would give them a sense of the purpose and the vision that you're calling them to. And I pray that in a world that can somehow feel quite dark and difficult, that this verse would be truth for these people, that they would go out into the world uncorrupted, that they could be a breath of fresh air in this squalid and polluted society. I pray that they can provide their children and young people with a glimpse of good living and of the living God. Father, may they carry the light-giving message into the night. Amen.